Welcome to the Itihasa channel. Today I talk about Amba and how she pursues the Lord Karthikeya. And we'll give a short description about the great Mahabali. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Ambe Narayana, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Anjalaya Namaha, Om Gurave Namaha. Amba watched on the sidelines as Parashurama fought his last battle. His last battle because he swore never to pick up arms and fight ever again, and the Kshatriyas heaved a sigh of relief. It was a battle between two of the greatest warriors of Bharatvarsha, Parashurama and Bheeshma. A battle so intense and ferociously fought that it was like a game of chess, but a game of chess that could cause the death of one of them or the annihilation of Bhuloka as we know it. It was a battle fought with the Astras, a thrust and parry so beautiful that even the Devas came to watch in the Vimanas. The Devas came to watch and were mesmerized by the beautiful way in which their own Astras were being used. And as the battle raged on and yielded no result, Amba's anger exploded. This arrogant and stubborn man, Bheeshma, not only did he refuse to marry her, he refused to die. And it was at that time that Amba realized that if there was somebody who could beat Bheeshma, it had to be someone with the knowledge of the Brahman. It had to be someone like a god, for no mortal man could beat Bheeshma in war. And then Amba realized that there could be only one person who could fulfill these criteria to beat Bheeshma. That one man would be the god of war, Shiva's illustrious son, the Lord Karthikeya. And Amba decided that if she had to call the Lord Karthikeya to beat Bheeshma, that penance to call him would have to be of such intense magnitude that it would require a superhuman effort, for a god as elusive as Karthikeya wouldn't normally come to meet a mortal person like Amba. And it was this time that the astute statesman Bheeshma realized that he needed to know what Amba was up to. Bheeshma was a statesman whose entire life was devoted for the protection of the kingdom of Hastinapur. The kingdom of Hastinapur, which ranged from the far ranges of the Himalayas in the north and the sea on the west and the south and the east. This was the extent of the great Bharatvarsha in those days. And Bhishma realized that if he had to protect Bharatvarsha, he had to have an army of spies, both on the outer extent of the kingdom and within the palace walls, to ensure that every little secret would reach him. It was to Bhishma that the idea and the knowledge that an avatar of Narayana was born, called Krishna, that an avatar was born in Mathura. To the parents Devaki and Vasudeva, this knowledge reached Bhishma first. And it was to him that the knowledge of the wondrous exploits of the little Krishna reached Bhishma. And it was with this army of spies Bhishma ensured that they would follow Amba through all her penance. And he would get regular reports about what Amba went through on a daily basis. And Amba began her penance and her sadhana. Amba would sit in the lotus position for hours on end, eschewing food and sometimes water. What Amba did could be called intermittent fasting. The only difference being Amba's intermittent fasting was eating once a week And later, it went to once a month, to finally coming to once a year, where initially she would have fruits and vegetables and some water to drink. And finally, those fruits just dwindled down to a few berries. And later, her diet only consisted of leaves. Amba would first sit in the cross legged lotus position. And when she realized the Lord Karthikeya was not pleased with this, she would stand with her hands raised up in the Ashwini Mudra. And when she realized Karthikeya wouldn't come, she would stand on one leg and perform intense tapasya, till at one point of time an intense heat emanated from her, and the earth around her became arid. The streams and rivers around her went subterranean. It disappeared from the surface of the earth. And the plants died out, the trees wilted, the birds stopped coming, and there was a deathly silence around the place where Amba would do penance. And every day that Amba's penance got more and more severe, Bheeshma's spies would come and report to him about the difficulties she's facing, about the troubles she's going through. And when Bhishma would hear of this, he would go into his room and close his eyes, and a melancholy would overpower him, and he would cry on certain days for the woman he loved, the only woman he loved, was going to all this, going through all these troubles just to have him dead. One of those days when he got bad news, the sage Vedavyasa Krishna Dvaipayana had come to Hastinapur. He had come to meet Ambalika, and I will tell you that story sometime later. But at that time, he took the Rishi Vedavyasa, Krishna Dvaipayana, into confidence and had a discussion with him. He told Vyasa about his feelings for Amba and how he genuinely loved her, but because of his oath, he couldn't accept to marry her, and how she badly wanted to marry him, and how she loved him, and how that love had turned to rage, and now she wanted him dead. And in the process of wanting him dead, Amba was going through untold troubles and travails, and then Bhishma just couldn't bear it. And Bhishma asked Vedavyasa if he should give up his own life to stop Amba from going through this torture. Bhishma told Vedavyasa that he has the power to take his life at the time of his choosing, at the place of his choosing, and the manner of his choosing. Then should he just go to Amba and take his life in front of her and submit his life to her? For there would be nobody in Bharat Varsha who could take on Bhishma in war and who could defeat Bhishma in war. And seeing this, Vedavyasa looked lovingly and tenderly at Bhishma and said, "O Bharata Rishabha, your end will be at her hands, not just yet. For she will have to be born again, for she will have to have another birth. And in the next birth, she will meet you in battlefield. You will know that it is Amba from a previous birth, and Amba in the next birth will take your life." And for the first time, happiness and a sense of peace gripped Bhishma on hearing about the manner of his death. For such was the greatness of Bhishma, that he was willing to take his life so that the woman of his dreams, the woman he loved, would not go through the trouble she was undergoing. And when he realized that she would eventually be the cause for his death, nothing pleased him more. That was the great Bhishma. And with her eyes closed, she went with this penance for a few years, until one morning there was suddenly a loud sound, the gushing of the river next to her, which disturbed her and broke her penance. Not only was there the sound of the river, birds started chirping, a sound that had ceased for the last few years. There was a sound of bushes waving in the wind, and suddenly a divine fragrance filled the air. And Amba opened her eyes to the sight of a magnificent and radiant god standing in front of her, whose beautiful body was blemished by faint scars of wars gone by, whose long locks of hair hung down to his waist, with a smile so sweet that it brought tears in her eyes, and the realization hit that it was the Lord Karthikeya who had finally arrived. The Lord Karthikeya had arrived there with his army of Nagas standing next to him. And the Lord Karthikeya smiled, and the pain and the trouble that Amba endured for the last few years made her break down, and she cried and fell at his feet and couldn't stop sobbing. And the tears ran down her eyes onto his feet, wetting them completely. And with a voice that seemed disconnected and unmatched to this battle-hardened body, Karthikeya said, "Rise, my child," and he lifted her up. And Amba couldn't stop crying, and the words failed her. And he knew she wouldn't be able to talk. And Karthikeya said with a gentle voice, "I know what you want, dear Amba, and I've come to give it to you." And she gasped, "Will you fight and kill Bheeshma?" And he told her, "No, Amba, my fighting days are beyond me. I will never lift my veil again. I will never lift my spear again." Then Amba said, "But how will we kill Bheeshma then?" And Karthikeya said, "I have brought with me this beautiful garland of blue lotuses. These are lotuses from my own personal garden. Take this, Amba. These lotuses will never wilt, will never wither, will never grow dry. They will have this wonderful smell for as long as Bheeshma lives. And the man who wears this garland of lotuses will be the man who kills Bheeshma." And Amba was overjoyed. She couldn't believe her ears. The great Karthikeya had just handed her a garland of the most beautiful lotuses from his own garden, and the wearer of this garland would finally kill Bheeshma. Her prayers answered, she fell back down at his feet and continued sobbing until he disappeared from in front of her, along with the Nagas who followed him. And as she raced to the plains of Bharatvarsha to find the brave warrior who would wear this garland and conquer Bheeshma, the words of Karthikeya rang in her ears, that he would never ever lift his veil again, that he would never ever fight again, that he had given up war for the last time. Why do these gods, with infinite power, choose not to fight? Why do these gods with infinite power and infinite energy choose to give up their arms and take the path of peace? We will talk a little about this aspect of our gods by talking about two gods. One, the Lord Narayana, and the other, the Lord Karthikeya. So we talk about Lord Narayana by talking about the great King Bali, Mahabali as he was called, or Maveli as he was called in some areas. The great King Bali was a great brave king of Bharatvarsha. It is said that the reign of Bali extended from the northern plains of Bharatvarsha to the sea on the southern edge of Bharatvarsha. His reign extended from the sea on the eastern seaboard to the western seaboard. And he had his kingdom in the southern part of Bharatvarsha, in the peninsular part of Bharatvarsha. He was a great king of unparalleled bravery. And it was said that Bharatvarsha prospered in his time, and he existed from a much earlier yuga. A much earlier yuga, from a time when Indra had just come to enter Bharatvarsha and was trying to form alliances with the kings of Bharatvarsha and show his sovereignty over Bharatvarsha. And Bali was one of those kings who refused to accept the sovereignty. Why would he? He was an entrenched king in Bharatvarsha. He was a just king. His subjects loved him. Nobody wanted him out. And so he decided that he had to challenge Indra and he had to go against the sovereignty of Indra. And we know that every king of Bharatvarsha who would challenge the sovereignty of Indra would be labeled under the umbrella term of Asura. We had discussed this in an early episode, I think it was episode 6. For Indra and the Devas are considered Sura. So anyone against the Suras would be deemed Asura. And of course, once you become an Asura, a memo sent to all the comic book publishing houses in Bharatvarsha that henceforth this man is an Asura and he shall be depicted in all the comic books and cartoons as being black in color, having a huge sword, dripping with blood, a huge handlebar mustache, and a crown with horns on it. And so it was that Bali henceforth was always depicted so. Well, coming to the Mahabharata, and so Bali decided that he would attack the Devas whenever they came down to Bhuloka. And at every place that the Devas came to talk to the kings of Bhuloka, Bali's forces would attack them. And Indra decided that Bali is a formidable opponent. He needed to be quelled. But it was not easy to quell Bali, for his forces were very well trained and very disciplined. And he spoke to his preceptor Brihaspati, who then said that the best way to get Bali would be to extract the Amrita from the ocean. And if the Devas could extract the Amrita and have the Amrita, this elixir would grant them the ability to heal from extremely bad and almost vicious and mortal wounds. This elixir would give the Devas the power to come out of severe infections caused by wars. This elixir would allow the Devas to be almost immortal by its way of improving the healing powers in their bodies. But extracting the Amrita from the ocean was no mean task, and the Devas couldn't do it alone. So Indra approached Bali with the promise of a treaty, and he told Bali that we should extract the elixir, the Amrita, from the ocean. And it's not possible for you to do it alone, neither is it possible for us to do it alone. And we need to work jointly and together to extract the Amrita from the ocean. And Bali was a pragmatic man. He realized that his war against Indra was not a personal rivalry. He didn't hate Indra. He just didn't accept the sovereignty of Indra. He was justified in doing so. And he accepted Indra's treaty and proposal, and they decided to work together to extract the elixir, the Amrita, from the ocean. Provided, of course, both would get a bit of it. And Bali thought maybe once he would also get the Amrita, he would live in peace with Indra's forces. They would give each other a wide berth. And so it was decided that Mount Meru would be brought down with the help of Narayana to the ocean, and Vasuki would be used, the king of Nagas would be used for the churning of the ocean. And then went on the churning of the ocean, and finally a lot of things came out of the ocean, which we will discuss at a later time. And finally, when the elixir, the Amrita, came out from the ocean, it was decided to distribute among the Devas and Bali's forces. I will not call them the Asuras. But due to some act of subterfuge at the time of distribution of the Amrita, Bali's forces and Bali didn't get their share of the Amrita. I think only Rahu and Ketu, two of Bali's lieutenants, got it. And then the Devas waged war against Bali's forces for they knew they had the Amrita and they were invincible. And Bali's forces got a sound beating, and Bali had to run away. Smarting from the loss, not so much the loss of the war, but more the deception that he had to endure, Bali decided to find a guru who could make him strong again and who could make him powerful enough to take on the Devas. And one such guru came to him, Shukracharya, a rishi of unparalleled wisdom. He was a student of Angirasa, Rishi Angirasa, Maharishi Angirasa, who incidentally was also the father of Brihaspati. And Angirasa taught Shukracharya and Brihaspati at the same time. And such was the greatness of Angirasa that, realizing the greatness of Shukracharya over his own son Brihaspati, he taught Shukracharya much more than he taught Brihaspati. This was the beauty of our dharma, where a teacher would be so unbiased that they would properly gauge their students, and if even their child was among one of the students and the child was not worthy, but there was another one who was more worthy than their child, they would teach that person more than their own child. And so Angirasa taught Shukra things that he didn't teach his own son Brihaspati. He taught Shukra various astras and mantras and various fields of knowledge. And he also taught Shukra the mantra of Sanjeevani, the art of bringing the recently dead and the dying back to health and back to good life. And Shukra was always insulted by Brihaspati, because Brihaspati went on to become the preceptor of the Devas, and that gave him immense power and immense name and fame. And he lost no chance in insulting Shukracharya. And Shukracharya decided that if there was one person who could take on the Devas, not just in plain brute strength, but one person who could equal Indra in nobility, equal Indra in greatness, if there was one person who could take on Indra and defeat Indra in Devaloka, it would be none other than Mahabali or Maveli. And so he accepted to be the teacher for Bali. And Shukracharya conducted innumerable yajnas and mahayajnas to give Bali immense strength. He brought out a golden chariot, a chariot that could fly to Devaloka, a chariot that was stacked with invincible astras and an unending array of astras, with which Bali could lay an unending siege on Devaloka and conquer Devaloka. He gave Bali a golden mail of armor that would make Bali impervious to various astras and weapons. And with the Sanjeevani that Shukracharya would use to get the dying and the just recently dead back to life and back to good health, Bali realized he was invincible. And then Shukracharya informed and educated Bali on the best way to attack Devaloka, on the weak points of Devaloka and how to take command over Devaloka. And with Shukracharya's help, Bali launched a savage attack on Devaloka. That Asura Bali launched a savage attack on Devaloka. And in this attack, when Indra saw the siege coming, he spoke to Brihaspati and asked, how is it that this Bali, who he had vanquished with the power of the Amrita, is finally coming back and laying siege on Devaloka? And Brihaspati, with his mind, deciphered that it was Shukracharya who was helping Bali. And deep in his mind, he knew he was no match for Shukracharya. He was a guru of the Devas. He was a guru respected in all the three worlds. Deep inside, he knew his deficiencies, and he informed Indra that it was not going to be a war that Indra can win. And he advised Indra that the best course of action would be to run away, For he who runs away would live to fight another day. Yes, he who fights and runs away would live to fight another day, but Indra was advised not to fight. And Indra, as he does once or twice in his lifetime, ran away from the back door. And Indra ran away, taking his devas, leaving Devaloka open for Bali to come. And Bali came into Devaloka. And unlike most savage marauders who invade a land, he didn't lay waste to Devaloka. He started ruling Devaloka much better than Indra did. And Indra realized that there was no way that he and some of his close devas could come back to Indraloka the way Bali ruled Indraloka and Bharatvarsha. And Indra knew his time in Devaloka would probably be up. Around this time, the mother of the Devas, Aditi, was pained that Indra and the Devas, her children, had to run away from Devaloka and were in hiding, not able to come back to the country, to the kingdom that they ruled. And she went to her husband, this great Rishi Kashyapa, a Sapta Rishi who was trained by the Adiyogi himself. She went to Kashyapa and told him, "It pains my heart that my children have to run away and hide. What can we do? Can we not call the Lord Narayana to come and kill Bali? To conquer Bali and send him away from Devaloka?" And Kashyapa in his divine wisdom knew that he wasn't going to be the one to call Narayana. He told his wife Aditi, "You call him." And Aditi said, "How can I call the Narayana from who lives way across in Vaikunta, across the Ksheerasagara, the Milky Way?" The Ksheerasagara term has been used in Sanskrit to describe the Milky Way, and it's also used to describe the Pacific Ocean. Though, of course, in this context, when we talk about Narayana, it is used to describe Narayana's abode in Vaikunta across the Ksheerasagara, the Milky Way of the galaxy. And Kashyapa taught Aditi the techniques of calling on Narayana and inviting to come to Devaloka to meet her. It is no mean task to get in touch with somebody who stays across the Milky Way. But there were techniques in Bharatvarsha and in Devaloka where you could call and send the message out to people who lived across the galaxy. And using these techniques taught to her by Kashyapa, Aditi sat in intense penance using mantras which would make Narayana hear Aditi's call and come to her. And Narayana came across the Ksheerasagara to meet Aditi, the mother of the Devas. And he sat next to Aditi and asked, "Mother, what would you want? What would you have me do? Why have you called me?" And she told him it pained her deeply that her sons were in hiding and he should do something to conquer and kill Bali and send Bali away. And Narayana thought about it. He thought about his last experience with Bali during the Samudra Manthana, the churning of the ocean, where Bali's forces were a dignified single unit which would not do a single act without the command of Bali. They maintained themselves with dignity through the Manthana that took place. Various things came out of the ocean: the Parijata tree, the Apsaras, the beautiful Apsaras, the Airavata. And every time something of this magnitude came up, Indra would say, I want. He would ask for it. And Bali would just nod and say, "Yes, take it." Such was the dignity of Bali, which Narayana himself had noticed. It hadn't escaped him. That Bali was a man of extreme dignity. And the only thing Bali took from the ocean was what Indra allowed him to take, the Varuni, which was a kind of a wine, a celestial wine. And Narayana felt that this man doesn't deserve to be killed. This man doesn't deserve a humiliating defeat. So he looked at Aditi and told her, "Why don't I send my Avatara into you? Let my Avatara be born from you, and let my Avatara conquer Bali. Wouldn't that give you the most happiness, mother? Wouldn't that give you the most satisfaction?" And Aditi was overjoyed and she said, "Yes. Would your Avatara come and be born from me?" And Narayana said, "Yes, so be it." So, what are avatars? What is an avatara? Parshurama was an avatara of Vishnu. And Parshurama existed in the time of Rama, who was also an avatar of Vishnu, of Narayana. And Parshurama existed in the time of Krishna, who was also an avatar of Narayana. So, how do two avatars exist in parallel? What happens to Narayana when these avatars are there on earth? Does he disappear? Does he go off somewhere? So, delving into the various texts, let's quickly discuss what the avatars are. Now, the great gods like Shiva, Narayana, Durga, Kali, Ganesha, Karthikeya, Anjaneya, Ayyappa, and so many other great gods, they are great and powerful not only on superhuman physical strength. For what is physical strength in a battle while you are in concentration fighting with an enemy? A stray arrow or a stray mace hurled from somewhere could hit you on the head or hit you on the chest and could kill you in an instant. So it is not just pure physical strength that makes these gods great. It is the power of consciousness, the force of consciousness that makes these people great, that makes these gods great. The force of consciousness harnessed from the universe, a force that can bend reality, a force that can bend time, and a force that can bend space. Such is the force of the consciousness, a force that is harvested from the cosmic power of the universe through the correct use of the pranava, the sound Om. The pranava resonates with a frequency similar to the cosmic power. And using this pranava, not over few days and years, but over centuries, these gods get the entire force of consciousness in them, a force that bends space, time, and reality. And it is this force of consciousness, this power of consciousness that distinguishes the great gods from the devas, that distinguishes the great gods from normal humans of Bhuloka. And when Mother Earth is burdened with a tyrannical rule, with a terror from people who torment her and torment the people and make the Mother Earth like a cow whose legs have been cut, at such times the great Narayana decides that it is time to send an avatara into Bhuloka, an avatara with his power, an avatara with his conscious energy that would rid the Bhuloka, that would rid the Mother Earth of the tyrannical people who torment and burden her. And when the Lord Narayana has to send this force of consciousness into a birth that will be born on Bhuloka, probably in Bharatvarsha, or could be anywhere in Bhuloka. And when the Lord Narayana has to send this force to be born, it drains him from the centuries of force that he has accumulated. And that force enters the newborn child, and that child is said to be in sync with the Narayana himself, and that child is said to be spiritually conjoined with the Narayana. And that birth, an amsha of Narayana, is an avatar of Narayana. And so Narayana told Aditi, let an avatar or an amsha of himself be born and through Aditi. And that child which was born was Vamana, a dwarf with no hair, a dwarf with ectodermal dysplasia. This child was radiant from birth. It exuded a tejas that was overpowering. And the sage Kashyapa realized that this child had imbibed all the knowledge of the Vedas which he used to chant and which he used to sing when the child was in the womb of Aditi. The, the ability of a child to accept knowledge and information while in the womb wasn't first done at the time of Abhimanyu, though it was the most famous. It was done from time immemorial. It was known from time immemorial. And there were many rishis which were born with the knowledge of the Brahman from their parents. And such was the birth of the Lord Vamana, the sage Vamana, who was the avatar of Narayana and who had the conscious power of Narayana. And this child was a remarkable child who at the time of his Upanayana was blessed by Brahma and the gods themselves. They all came down to bless this child Vamana, and they bore gifts for this child Vamana, gifts which would be normal for a Brahman child. And using these gifts, the sage, the child Vamana, decided to go and confront Mahabali, decided to go and confront Bali, to take away from Bali what rightfully belonged to the Devas. Around this time, having got great victory over Devaloka and Bhuloka, Bali with his teacher Shukracharya was performing the Dasha Ashwamedha sacrifice. An Ashwamedha sacrifice 10 times in power to attain complete control over Devaloka and Bhuloka, the entire Bhuloka. He was doing it in a massive Yagyashala on the banks of the Narmada river. It was a beautiful Yagyashala created, which housed the gods, which housed the munis from all the lands and all the lokas. From all the 3 lokas, munis, rishis, kings, princes, and some of the gods came and was in attendance. It was a yagya of unimaginable proportions being supervised by Shukracharya himself, the most brilliant rishi of his time. And it was to this Yagyashala that the great Vamana Rishi Vamana, the small child, a dwarf-like child, a small bald child with a simple cow pen around him, walked into the Yagyashala. And the burning tejas that emanated from this small child Vamana was so brilliant that everyone in the Yagyashala realized that it was a supreme being that had come into the Yagyashala, and they all got up and bowed in reverence. Bali rushed to this child and touched his feet and asked for water to perform the regular Argya and Padya, washing of the hands and the feet, and used this water to put it on himself as a mark of intense respect. And immediately took this child to the highest seat in the Yagyashala, which was reserved for the greatest rishi or the greatest muni that would come to this Yagyashala. And to this great chair, he seated Vamana. And touching Vamana's feet, he looked at Vamana and said, I know not who you are, O great sage. I do not know who you are, but I do know that you are one of the greatest in all of Brahman and greatest in all of the universe. And it is my privilege that you have come to this Yagyashala to bless me. And then Bali said the words that showed the type of person Bali was, which Narayana knew. He was probably waiting to hear. And then Bali said the words that melted the heart of Vamana. It melted the heart of the Lord Narayana himself. Bali touched his head to the feet of Rishi Vamana and said, I know not who you are, O great Rishi, But I do know that you emanate the power of the universe and that you have decided to bless my yajna with your presence. I have commanded the resources of Bhuloka and Devaloka. But what are these resources that I command? It is my great luck and privilege that you have come in front of me, that I am able to beg you for favors, beg from you favors in the form of blessings. And in return for these favors, I may have at my disposal whatever you may ask for. And whatever you may ask for, O great Rishi, is yours. It's yours for the asking. And this was the humility of Bali. He didn't tell the Lord Vamana, the Rishi Vamana, I am a great man. I have everything. Take what you want. Ask for what you want. No. He told the Rishi Vamana, he told the sage Vamana, we are beggars who beg for blessings in front of you. We are beggars who beg for favors from you. And in return for these favors, we have abundant resources that we may give you whatever you ask for. Please ask for whatever you desire, and we will give it to you. And Vamana said, O Mahabali, and he referred to Bali as Mahabali. He said, O Mahabali, you are truly a great man. You are truly as great as Indra himself. And at this time, Bali's sage Shukracharya drew Bali aside and took him aside and said, do you not know who you're talking to? Do you not know who sits in front of you? Do you not identify that presence? That's the Lord Narayana himself, who's come here to take everything you have, who's come here to take your life from you. Do you not recognize the Narayana? What are you doing? Are you going to offer him everything you have? Is this humility? This humility is going to be the end of you, Bali. Stop it. And Bali looked at his rishi, his guru Shukracharya, and said, if it is the Lord Narayana who's come to ask for my life, is it not something that is so great that I would love to give without thinking? And Shukracharya said, when a Brahmana comes to ask anybody of his life, even if that person has promised the Brahmana that he will give him whatever he wants, he is well within the rules of the Vedas. For the Rig Veda itself says that if a Brahmana comes and asks you for your life, you are well within rules to refuse it, even if you have promised the Brahmana something. And Bali looks at Shukracharya and says, my dear Guru, it is my dharma that when a Brahmana asks me for something, I cannot refuse. And if that Brahmana is the Lord Narayana, how so can I refuse now with that knowledge? And he went back to Rishi Vamana and said, O great Rishi, what do you desire? And the Rishi Vamana said, I just want 3 paces of land. And Shukracharya realized what this Narayana was up to. There was a time when Bali was denied the Amrita, and he had decided that it was not going to happen under his watch, that Bali, the simple-minded but brave Bali, would be deceived again. And he pulled Bali aside and said, this small child seems to have small feet, and you think that when this small child asks for 3 paces of land, it would be just 3 paces? He will take the Bhuloka, he will take the Devaloka, and he will take your life with it, with those 3 paces of land. Be wary, O Bali, be wary, for this is going to be your end. And Bali looked at his Rishi Shukracharya and said, no, my Rishi, I cannot take your advice, and if this Narayana has come to ask the life of Bali, he shall have it. And so saying, Bali started to walk towards the Rishi Vamana, And Shukracharya got angry, for he couldn't bear to see his favorite Shishya give up his life to the Narayana. This is Shukracharya, whose father was Bhrigu. Bhrigu was a rishi who, in his temper, had put his foot on Narayana's chest, because Narayana, who refused to accept the presence of Bhrigu when he had gone to meet Narayana. This was Shukracharya, who was the son of Bhrigu and Khyati. And this Shukracharya couldn't bear to see his disciple give away his life to Narayana when Narayana would just come and ask for it. For he knew Bali was a great man and didn't deserve this deception. And so saying, he said, "Oh Bali, I leave from this place, for I cannot bear to see you give away your life. And I'm sure your life will end today, for this is none other than Narayana himself." Shukracharya didn't curse Bali to death. In his exasperation, he predicted the future, that Bali would be finished by the Lord Narayana. And then Bali called his wife Vindhyavali. No, Mahabali called his wife Vindhyavali. For by now, the great Vamana, the great Narayana, was looking at Bali with renewed love and renewed respect. And Mahabali called his wife Vindhyavali and said, "Get the water to wash this Brahmana's feet." And as he said this, Vamana looked at Mahabali and said, "You are truly a great man, Mahabali. For today I remember your ancestry. It is no mean ancestry. Your grandfather was Prahalada himself. The Prahalada who was an ardent bhakta of Narayana. The Prahalada who prayed to Lord Narayana for protection against his own father Hiranyakashipu, and for whose protection Narayana sent an avatar of himself in the form of Narasimha to kill Hiranyakashipu for your protection. That was your grandfather. Your father was the great Virochana, the Virochana who had conquered the Devas himself, just like you have done. And the great Virochana who was invincible, and the great Virochana who could not be killed except by himself. And finally, he was killed by deception. The Devas knew that Virochana, in his morning prayers, would grant any Brahmana whatever wish he wanted. And the Devas came disguised as Brahmanas and asked for alms. And when Virochana said, "Ask for what you want," these Devas, dressed as Brahmanas, asked for his life, his very life. And your father Virochana gave his life as alms to those Brahmanas. You are of that ancestry. How could you not be noble? You are greater than Indra. You deserve the greatest seat in Devaloka. But, O Mahabali, if you remain here, you will forever have to fight Indra. That is not what you deserve. You are far greater than that. You are far greater than having to fight with Indra on a daily basis. For one day your luck might run out and you might lose, and you do not deserve to lose to Indra. And so saying, Vamana's size started to increase to phenomenal proportions till it enveloped the entire galaxy. And Vamana's size didn't increase to kill Mahabali. Vamana's size didn't increase to conquer Mahabali. For Mahabali had already put his life and everything at the feet of Vamana. Vamana's size increased to show Mahabali the Vishwarupa of Narayana. And as Mahabali gazed up at the Vishwarupa of Lord Narayana, he realized that this small Brahmana child who was in front of him was no other than the Lord Narayana himself, and he bent down and put his head at Vamana's feet. And Narayana said, not Vamana, Narayana said, "O Mahabali, I will give you the land, the kingship of Sutaloka. It is a place that is under my protection. It is a place that Indra will never reach. It is a great land which deserves of your rule, of your kingship, of your magnanimity. Go there, O Mahabali, and rule to the end of the pralaya in absolute confidence that nobody will ever challenge you. For I have seen that untold success and untold power have not got into your head. Untold power, which normally makes people arrogant, has kept you humble, and you have maintained the absolute humility in spite of having untold power over Bhuloka and Devaloka. You truly deserve the kingship of Sutaloka, not Patala, Sutaloka. And Bali looked at Narayana and said, O Lord Narayana, my subjects in Bharatvarsha love me, and I love them. And I have been with them for so many thousand years. Those days, people would live for thousands of years. And I've been with them for thousands of years, and there's a bond between me and them. And it will hurt me that I should leave them, and I know it will hurt them that I would go away. I would like to visit them. And the Lord Narayana said, you should visit them. They deserve the visit from you. Every year at one point of time, great Mahabali, come and visit your kinsfolk. Come and visit your kingdom. Come and visit your subjects. Visit them and be with them and stay with them for a day, and then go back to your Sutaloka. And thenceforth, the great Mahabali comes to the southern part of Bharatvarsha. And the people from Kerala, who are actually settled all over the world, invite the great Mahabali to their home, cook the best food, create an array of flowers to invite the Mahabali to guide them to his home. For when Mahabali will come in his chariot, he will need markings on Bhuloka to reach the correct place where his devotees stay. And the pookalam that is laid out in front of the house gives the idea to Mahabali where to land and where to come and where to visit. And every year for thousands of years, his subjects, with the memory of his rule, with the memory of the greatness of Mahabali, still welcome Mahabali to their homes every year, thousands of years hence. That is the greatness of Mahabali. And in the story of Mahabali, we see the greatness of Narayana, a god with a conscious power that can bend time, space, and reality, could finish off Mahabali in an instant. He chose not to do it. And the measure of greatness of a god is in deciding when to choose not to use that immense, infinite power. And that was the greatness of the Lord Narayana. And like the Lord Narayana, who chose not to use his greatness to kill and quell Bali, so too is the greatness of the Lord Karthikeya. Karthikeya, the illustrious son of Shiva, was the commander of the Devasena, was the commander of the army of the Devas. When Indra realized that the Lord Karthikeya was gifted with immense strength and immense power and the power of the consciousness, he decided that he would be the right person to lead the Devas in the war against the Danava hordes that were invading Bharatvarsha. We had spoken about the Danava hordes who had to be quelled and who had to be driven out, for they were pillaging and looting the land and killing and torturing the people of Bharatvarsha. So Indra utilized the power and the commandership of Karthikeya to lead the Devas against the Danava hordes. Karthikeya, the Lord Karthikeya, had an absolute knowledge of the Brahman. He could look at the stars in the sky, see the lives of the people around him, and he could make a correlation between the position and the arrangement of stars in the sky and the lives that the people around him lead. And he was the one who brought astrology, the art of astrology, to Bharatvarsha. He was the one who could predict the future of the people by seeing how their past played out before them and how the arrangement of the stars over them could control their lives. The Lord Karthikeya used this ability of seeing the stars and the position of the stars to predict what the right time would be to attack their enemy, to predict what their enemy's weaknesses are, to predict where the weaknesses of the enemy lay. And with this power and extreme bravery and the power of consciousness, he would wage battle against the opponent and kill and subdue the opponent. He was ever victorious. He never faced defeat, not once. But then he had to fight the Asuras. For there was a narrative that the Asuras were against the Devas, were demons who would attack the Devas and fight against the Devas. And the Lord Karthikeya was victorious against all these Asuric forces or the demon forces. And over time, the Lord Karthikeya realized that war is a battle not of the soldiers. War is a battle of the narratives. It's a narrative that decides the war. It's a narrative that decides who is righteous and who is wrong. For in a war, the righteous can be deemed to be wrong. In a battle of narratives, a war is old men talking and young men dying. And he realized the futility of war. He realized that he was played into this battle of narratives, and he was made to fight innumerable wars where he fought against the righteous, where he fought against the brave, where he fought against the great people of Bharatvarsha. And at one point, when that realization hit, he decided that it was time to apologize, to seek forgiveness from the people who he had wronged. Not knowingly, it was unknowingly done, but it was time to seek forgiveness. And what a God was he, of immeasurable power and strength, of infinite power. He didn't have to ask for forgiveness, but yet he did, for he knew he had done something that was not right. And in this repentance, he decided to forever give up arms. And the Lord Karthikeya one day decided that it was time that he laid down his veil, his spear of immense strength, that he laid down his veil for one last time and came down to Bharatvarsha and settled down in Bharatvarsha. And as he walked down from Devaloka, his army of the Nagas followed with their lord. The Nagas were the protection force of the gods. Some of the gods they protected were much more powerful than the Nagas themselves. But the protection was a symbolic protection. It was a protection for the greatness of the god, not the physical being of the god per se. It was a protection for the idea of the god. It was a protection for the symbol of the god. And the Nagas, who were in the protection detail for the Lord Karthikeya, Muruga, came down from Devaloka with him, step by step, around him, surrounding him, as he was their Lord. He didn't need the protection, neither did they need his protection, but they came together nevertheless. They came to a place along the Western Ghats, in a place called Kumara Parvata, named after the eternal Kumara, Karthikeya, in Subramanya, somewhere in the Western Ghats in Karnataka. And the Lord Karthikeya with his army of Nagas came down and settled there. And it is said that the Nagas reside all through the Western Ghats. They range the Western Ghats. It is their property, it is their place. And it is said that no marauding invader could cross the Western Ghats as long as the Nagas prevailed over the Western Ghats. And it is true, for none of the marauding invaders have been able to cross the Western Ghats, for the Nagas guarded Karthikeya and the Ghats. And so the Lord Narayana and the Lord Karthikeya showed that the measure of greatness of a god is when they choose to not use that power, when they choose to relinquish that power. And that is true power, the ability to relinquish it. And this is what he told Amba when she asked if she would kill Bheeshma. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Amme Narayana, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Subramanyaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Anjanaya Namaha, Om Guruve Namaha.